while is the DDC. Presented by Spring Hill Heating and Cooling on Nashville's best sports talk, 102.5 and 106.3 The Game, and on the Game Nashville app.
And welcome into the DDC here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley alongside Willie Daunic. Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Derek Mason will be along a little bit later in the show. You're brought to you by Spring Hill Heating and Cooling. Willie Daunic, good morning. How are you?
Hello, Rob. Good to see you, my man.
Good to see you as well, my friend. Nick, what's going on? How's life?
Doing good, guys. A little sore this morning, but we're rocking and rolling on this Monday.
You're too young to be sore, man.
Yeah,
These
come on,
athletic
man.
competitions.
I can be sore. Come on, guys. I block shots, too, okay?
That's right. We'll take your thoughts all show long on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. So, Willie, we were talking about this on our show this morning. Just a really tough day yesterday in our city. Mark Howard passing away, and I was going to do a TV hit yesterday at News 2, and Corey Curtis, he answered the door, and he just said, "Hey, have you heard about Mark Howard?" And I was like, "No, what are you talking about?" And that's how I kind of learned of the news yesterday. And it's been number one, really cool to see the reaction all morning long of people just telling stories about Mark Howard and the impact that he's had on them throughout his career, both in television and on the radio as well, and with the Predators as well. Just a life well lived and an exceptional career in broadcasting. Our thoughts and prayers are out to his family. Just a really terrible situation. Well, I know you've been around Mark Howard for a long time. I guess I'll kind of turn the floor over to you for your thoughts on Mark Howard, the life that he lived, and his illustrious career in broadcasting as well.
Well, number one, I heard you and Joe talking to Jerry Helper. I thought he did a great job sort of sharing what Mark meant to the Predators part of this. And Jerry probably knows more than anything or more than anybody how important it was for the Predators and the media to sort of form a bond. You know, there's when a team comes in new, you know, Mark was one of the first from the mainstream media to say, this is important. You know, I want to be around. I'm going to come in there. I'm going to treat this team like a major league franchise. And not everybody did. You know, people were a little scared. Hey, I don't really know about this sport. But Mark was one of those that had a great impact. So that was a great section of it. But I think as I thought about Mark, there's so many layers to his footprint, his legacy on this town as a sports town. Because when I first got to Nashville and, you know, went to Vanderbilt, was playing on the basketball team, he was there for Channel 5 and covering the team. And that's one of the first things you learn about Mark is, you know, it's easy to observe how knowledgeable he was about any subject. And then after I graduated and I started working with him as a colleague, and Jerry said this as well, he really took the time to understand and read up on all subjects. And I think that's a critical part. And he didn't have to do that. You know, that's the thing about in the television for his gig at the time, when you have 5 to 7 minutes, you know, there are some people that are really good on camera. They deliver a good story. They probably broke a few stories. But you didn't have to know who the third baseman was for the Cubs, right, or, you know, who was the backup guard, who was the fourth guard on the Vanderbilt Commodores. That would be me. You know, he didn't have to know that, right? Because, you know, those guys don't really come into your broadcast or sportscast very often, but he did. And so in the early days of Sportstalk, you know, he and George Plaster were really, really close. That was when, you know, George was one of the first to say, now look at this guy, Mark Howard. Watch how much he knows. And when he would start to come into the Sportstalk circuit, as it started expanding, and there were more shows, he was an obvious one. That he would fill in from time to time, and you could see it. But he was a natural for sports talk radio, and you know, I admired his work ethic. But then the other thing that has come through, and you guys said it so well, was how supportive he was of his peers, and really not at all for his own gain. You know, he would really enjoy a conversation where he would go up to somebody and say, I read your stuff, or I watched your broadcast last night. You did a great job. He was just so encouraging about how you could take that. And, maybe we probably don't do that enough. So if there's a legacy for Mark, that's what I'll remember, and that's what I'm going to try to carry with me to, some of my colleagues. I want to be supportive. When I see something that I like, I want to try to tell people, hey, did a good job on that. So it's just a sad story. It's all too soon that happened. But we are going to miss Mark, no question.
Yeah, no question. I mean, I was telling this story this morning. I started doing stuff with the Predators when I was 18. I was fresh out of high school. I started my first year of college. I was doing stuff, and the Predators were gracious enough to give me some time and help me to come be credentialed for some games up there. And I remember a couple of months into it, Mark Howard was walking down the side of the stairs. He said, "Hey, Robbie, how you doing?" And I remember thinking to myself, wow, Mark Howard knows my name. Like, this is the guy that I've grown up listening to on the radio and, has been such a fixture in this area for a long time. And he has paid attention to me, and he knows my name, and he's read my stuff. And what stood out to me over the last, 18, 19, 20 hours, however long it's been since this news came out, was I was not alone in that. Like, there were so many people that have similar stories of, I got my start in this, and Mark was really supportive to me. And so that's kind of the thing that stands out to me. I mean, I think it was obvious how talented he was. We start talking about Sports Encyclopedia. He was very knowledgeable about whatever sports you wanted to throw out there. But, being supportive, like you just said, to other people getting started in the business or not even getting started in the business, just people who enjoyed his work in general. I mean, we've got somebody, Thomas, on the text line right now talking about him taking time to take a picture with his son out there in the heat. I mean, it's just that's who Mark Howard was.
Well, when he, Mark is from New York. He's a Yankees fan. For most people that know him well, they know he's a diehard Yankees fan. But in a fun way. I always enjoyed talking baseball with him. We enjoyed talking baseball with one another because we knew we couldn't talk that much about it on the air.
Right.
But he had that New York thing, and I think early on, especially in the sports talk realm, there was that, he's from the North, he's abrasive, something like that. And only as he got more and more comfortable, he and Kevin Ingram and Frank Wycheck, what an unbelievable team that ended up being. I was fortunate enough, of course, back at our previous home on 104.5, George and I and Darren were doing some afternoons, and we were established. And then when that show came in and those three hit it off, and, of course, Paul Kuharski ended up being sort of a regular contributor, that was an incredible combination. And Mark, I think, really won a ton of people over for his ability to, number one, showcase all the knowledge that he had. But number two, I think a lot of people were like, oh, who's this guy from New York? I've been watching him on Channel 5. He's abrasive or whatever. I think you saw a different side of him. You saw the real human of Mark, and he was the perfect guy for that show. And it just took sports talk in this town to new heights.
Yeah, no question. I remember my early days of getting started with the Predators. He was on the TV broadcast team at that time, and just his ability to do his job and not take himself overly seriously. I mean, I think that's becoming more and more of a lost art nowadays. I remember he and Shea Weber one time really got into it. I don't even remember what it was about in the locker room. And, on the outside, it looks like, man, these guys are really after each other. And the next day, they're back in there just cutting up about it. Shea went up and, apologized to him.
He could really do that. He could be honest, but also, like Jerry was saying, he could cross you some way. You would maybe disagree with something he said.
Yeah.
But he was never going to not be available to talk about it, and he was able to get through a lot of that. And, something that I think should be said, Robbie, he was so supportive of everybody else. I don't even think he really appreciated how good he was a lot of times, and that kind of makes me sad to think about. I just hope we all, because I know we're appreciating him today, I hope that we showed enough appreciation to him when he was, doing his thing, because he was really, really good. Yeah. He was really good.
Well, then he was And there's always that photo. It was, I think Corey Curtis brought it up today of the Music City Miracle and Kevin Dyson's running down the sideline, and there's that photo of like Mark's over in the corner with his hands up like this. There was a passion for sports, and I thought Jerry Helper did an outstanding job of kind of explaining it. It was what he did. He loved researching and talking and conversing with other people about sports.
I had the pleasure of doing some high school championship games with him, basketball, football, and that's where, to me, I saw a lot of the preparation. He was so good. It's a high school game, so you can't just pull up a website and see everybody's team statistics. I mean, you're trying to piece together whatever you can find. Especially back then, it's gotten better now. But you were lucky to get a roster sometimes.
Right.
But man, he would come in with a lot of notes. He had talked to coaches. He had talked to other people that had watched these teams play, and you really felt good about going into a broadcast as if you really knew something about these teams that the parents and the fans of those teams. I mean, you think about this. Who's going to be watching that game? You got that really sometimes it's Dyersburg, Tennessee, or Lewisburg, a real tight-knit community. They've been watching this team for years, right? So you got to I was just thinking, look, let's make sure we pronounce everybody's name right.
That's right.
Who are the top 2 or 3 players? I'm trying to – he was really getting down in there to where I felt like the community back there was that guy's really done his homework. That guy knows about this team. That was a really pro thing that he did in those broadcasts.
Yeah, no question about it.
We all learned a lot. I think you can say you did. I did from a lot of things, just learning a lot about how a guy operates professionally. And he was a pro.
No question about it. A life well lived from Mark Howard. We'll take your thoughts and memories of Mark Howard all throughout the show today. 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Coming up next, there was a big move in the NHL over the weekend. We'll get Willie's thoughts on the Matthew Tkachuk trade and what that means from the Predators and where they go from here. Coming up next, you're listening to the DDC on 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
If you're on the road between downtown Nashville,
they're still in good shape to make the playoffs.
And I-840.
Players make it clear they don't want to be somewhere anymore.